All right. Good morning, everybody. We've got a fairly short agenda this morning. Appreciate everyone traveling to Helena for the summer business meeting and session. I'm just going to go ahead and get the meeting started. We'll call the meeting to order. Please note that this meeting is being recorded and will be posted on Montana University System website, as it usually is. Jasmine, if you want to. Here.
Regent Nystuen.
Here.
Regent Buchanan.
Here.
Regent Sexton.
Here.
Regent Rogers.
Here.
Regent Dombrowski.
Here.
Regent Babb.
Here.
Commissioner Christian.
Here.
Governor Gianforte is being represented by Dylan Clapmeyer, who is, I see here via Zoom. We will hear from him here shortly. And we are expecting Superintendent Brunson as well.
Perfect. Thank you, Jasmine. Again, thank you all for joining us today. We've already talked about our trips into Helena. I'm glad everyone made it safely, and I hope everyone's had the chance to enjoy so far a beautiful Montana summer, hot and dry Montana summer. Before we really dive into the agenda this morning, I wanted to take just a quick moment to congratulate Regent Sexton on being reappointed by Governor Gianforte to the board as a repeat student regent. So congratulations, Regent Sexton. We're super glad to have you. You've had an uncommon experience as a student regent, having most of our meetings during your tenure remote or virtual. And so we're just excited that you get to be wrapped into kind of the regular business as we sort of explore the post-pandemic MUS. So welcome back to the board. We're excited to have you on board. With today's agenda being certainly on the shorter side, which is usually the case for our summer meetings, we're going to have a brief report by Commissioner Christian and his staff, doing a number of different updates, and one in particular is just the recent activity related to compensation for student athletes. We know a judgment came down on that matter, and we'll learn more about that today and what that means for the Montana University system. We'll also hear from our partners in the governor's office. As Jasmine mentioned, Dylan is going to be joining us representing Governor Gianforte, and Superintendent Elsie Arnson will also be joining us in person. So it'll be nice to have her with us this morning. And then following her reports, we'll take up a number of agenda items, which includes certainly a consent agenda with a number of things, as well as a couple action items from the University of Montana. So that will be followed by the opportunity, as always is the case, for public comment. But before we start, we dive into a couple quick housekeeping items. I'll ask Jasmine to address some of the technical components associated with today's meeting. Jasmine.
Very well, sir. Good morning, everyone. As we navigate through the agenda items, if you're a presenter, please be prepared to unmute yourself and turn your camera on when prompted by Zoom. OT staff will be assisting behind the scenes to help with these prompts throughout the meeting. Once your presentation is finished, your camera will be turned off. The Zoom system will alert you when your line is unmuted or muted, your video is turned on or off, if your raised hand has been acknowledged. A quick note on screen view. Please make sure you are in full screen mode and select gallery view. If at any point you need to step away from the meeting, please ensure that you are muted and turn off your video. If you wish to ask a question or make a comment during the meeting, please use the raise your hand feature. If joining online, the raise hand feature is normally found at the bottom of your screen. It may also be found at the bottom of the participants panel after clicking the participants button. If joining by phone, dial *9, that's asterisk, followed by the numeral 9 to raise your hand. Once your hand is raised, please wait to be called on. We will acknowledge your request as soon as we can. A time is scheduled for public comment, and additional instructions will come later. Written public comment may also be sent to me, Jasmine Castanevis, at casanovas@montana.edu. If you run into any technical issues at any point, please email Jared Smith at jsmith@montana.edu for assistance. Jared is on standby to help assist you. Again, one more time, Jared's email is jsmith@montana.edu. Back to you, Chair Loza.
Excellent. Thank you, Jasmine. So we'll turn to the agenda at this point, and we'll consider a motion to approve the May 26th, 27th meeting minutes. Is there a motion?
So second.
Moved by Regent Rogers. Is there any discussions from the board? Is there any discussion or corrections from the campuses? If so, please use the raise your hand feature or dial *9 if joining by phone.
Not seeing any hands at this time.
Is there any public comment? Any public comments? Again, if so, please use the raise your hand feature or dial *9 if joining by phone.
Not seeing any hands at this time.
Perfect. Thanks, Jasmine. Seeing no further comment, I'll call for the vote. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, same sign. That motion passes. All right, let's transition over to Commissioner Christian for his summary report.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the board. Thank you for being here. It's a pleasure to be in front of you. Certainly appreciate your efforts. Sometimes it's lost on the public that these are voluntary positions. It's not on me, but we appreciate you setting your normal lives aside and driving all over the state of Montana to benefit the university system, and greatly appreciate your service on this board. It's been a busy time for the board over the last year, and your participation is greatly appreciated. I do have a pretty brief report today, just a few things that we're going to touch on. Start, I guess, with just acknowledging certainly a lot of summer left to enjoy, and that's part of Montana experience. But know that you're a little technical. I think we're good. Know that your campuses are already sort of hard back at work thinking about what a return to fall will look like. A lot of planning happening right now, and they anxiously await getting students back on campus. And that is in fact the plan. We talked about it in May, but our plan is for a fairly normal looking fall. Of course, as everyone knows, we still continue to work through the processes, but that is what the campuses are geared up toward doing. Certainly, I just mentioned, but been a significantly challenging year for campuses. Had the pleasure to speak to Legislative Education Interim Committee yesterday, and a number of questions about our response and that. And I just, we've said it over and over, but it just bears repeating. The ability for the faculty, staff, students to meet the challenges is just nothing shy of impressive. And I certainly shared that with the interim committee. I think what we accomplished, many states didn't, and I'm very proud of what has happened. That said, clearly we're not completely out of the woods yet. And while we plan for a normal return this fall, I guess the overused phrase, but what will the new normal look like is certainly what we talk about. And that means making certain that we have many precautions in place. We know that we will still have some issues around, and that means some students may be working remote. We'll continue to be cautious on all fronts. If people aren't feeling well, we won't have them come to class. That means we need to go through a lot of the things that we dealt with over the last year. Remote access to class, quarantine, isolation, those things are still not forgotten. And so the campuses continue to work through what even a normal fall will look like under the new set of circumstances. So lots going on that front. Certainly needs mentioning, though, that the national consensus Certainly the medical field's consensus is vaccines have a place in this discussion, and we are encouraging campuses to ramp up those efforts. We're absolutely asking students to take the time, take the effort, do what's necessary to get vaccinated. As students visit campus through orientation and then their early return this fall, we are absolutely asking students to, if they haven't already done so, get vaccinated. And we're asking campuses to make vaccines readily available to students. Prominent places on campus where we can get as many students vaccinated as possible. We don't have a lot of students on campus now, so it's not our numbers, but certainly the numbers across the nation is that younger demographic is a bit sluggish on the uptake. And that's part of our return to fall, is that people do what is needed, and that's to get vaccinated. So we continue to work on that front. We're working on making it accessible, convenient, readily available, working with the state to see that we have vaccines on supply on demand, and then also working on some incentive programs to try to encourage students to roll up their sleeve and get done what is needed. Part of returning to a normal fall for this board also means we're going to try to return our own board activities to a more normal looking fall. I know I've heard from many of you, if not all of you, that interaction with campuses, the campus community, students, faculty, staff, all the things we do, including breakfast with community members, is just super important for you all to discharge your duties as regents. That interaction is needed. And so we are planning for a fairly normal looking board meeting in September in the great city of Butte, Montana at Montana Tech. We haven't been there for a couple of years now, and excited to get back there, and excited for Chancellor Cook and his team to be able to welcome the board. So that's 15th, 16th of September. And we hope to be in person, and we hope it to be a fairly normal meeting. Again, we will accommodate those that need accommodation through Zoom and other possibilities, but our plan is to have us back there in person. So we have a couple updates that I'm going to ask Executive Director Thigpen to do. Before that, though, a little bit out of the norm, but we've got very few announcements, although you all have met by now. I think one announcement very important to this board and myself in a very selfish sense, that is the addition of Jasmine to the team. As you are aware, but the general public may not be, Jasmine Casanova has joined our team in the Commissioner's office as the administrative assistant to this team, as well as myself. And so we'll be filling that role. Jasmine held several roles within the MUS already, starting in Bozeman, where she worked as an accounting associate in athletics, and then the business operation manager in the psychology department. So we're glad to have her here, and welcome, Jasmine, and thanks for what you've already done already. That also begs the question is, what happened to Amy? And proud to say that nothing. Amy's still here, but has taken on a new role here at Ochi, and that's the with student assistance. And we'll be working directly with students in the scholarship unit, scholarship activities with Witchy, Whammy, WeMoo, and others. A good career move for Amy, and one that we've certainly embraced, and she's excited in this new role, and I think will turn out to be a good move for all. So congratulations to Amy on her move, and welcome to Jasmine. I guess the last thing is extend a thanks again. These meetings are happening smoothly, but it doesn't happen on its own. And to Jasmine, Marlis, Jared, and Edwina in the back room, thank you for all you do to make these meetings happen via Zoom and all other formats. Appreciate that. So I think we are ready to go to Executive Director Thigpen. We're going to talk a little bit about the name, image, and likeness and some of the recent decisions there. And then a second update on the commissions and the work that they're doing that's been established under House Bill 632, just so you are up to speed on that front. So Ellen, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Commissioner, thank you very much. I'm still getting used to that. Just as the commissioner said, just a quick update on compensation for student athletes. You probably noticed this has been in the news quite a bit recently, and there has been quite a bit happening on that front. And I thought it would be helpful to just kind of clarify what's been happening and sort of what's not happening on that front. So there are really two pieces to this issue and to the puzzle. And the first has to do with NCAA rules around education related benefits for student athletes. And until recently, the NCAA had capped that amount of scholarship funding that schools could provide to student athletes, really beyond that full cost of attendance. So things like tuition, room and board, books, those sort of education related expenses. In a recent decision, which it really got a lot of attention, the US Supreme Court struck down that limit, saying that the NCAA had violated antitrust rules by setting sort of that nationwide limit on education-related expenses. There will likely be some additional litigation around what constitutes an education-related expense, but it's really things like computers, funding for study abroad programs, instruments, other school-related benefits beyond scholarships. So now, in light of that decision, there really is no cap on that amount, and schools will determine what can be provided, but again, in that education-related expense category. The second piece of that puzzle is the name, image, likeness issue, and it is different. This is where students may be compensated without running afoul of eligibility rules for use of their own name, image, and likeness. So the concept itself is pretty straightforward. It's the right we all have to promote a product or service or to be compensated on that front. For most of this, though, this really isn't an issue. I don't want to speak to the rest of the board, but I don't have anybody beating down my door to promote a product or on Instagram. But again, I don't want to speak for the rest of this board. But for student athletes, this can be a particular interest in something they might be interested in doing. And they might have some opportunities there, especially certain individuals. So, but this right to do that sort of activity conflicted with NCAA rules around amateurism, and that type of commercial activity was prohibited under longstanding NCAA rules. So on July 1st, just recently, a few weeks ago, the NCAA, after a huge national debate and a lot of states taking action around this area, the NCAA adopted an interim rule to allow students to engage in this activity, which could include being compensated for such things as like signing autographs at an event, modeling athletic apparel, promoting a product on Instagram or social media, or like making a personal appearance for an ad in the paper. I want to clarify that this is not compensation that's coming from a campus, an athletic department, anything like that. This is compensation that might come from a business, a nonprofit, something like that, a separate entity to promote a particular product. And I think that's an important clarification, because that first piece regarding education-related expenses is from the campus through scholarships, that sort of thing. The second issue, the name, image, likeness debate, is commercial activity through a sponsor, that sort of thing. Students would now be allowed to have representation, agents, tax advisors on this issue. And so that is an issue. And I think in what I've said recently is that our big piece, I think, of our focus from OCHE is going to be really encouraging training for an education for students around what is allowable, what's not allowable. I know that's a big focus right now from the campuses, and after talking to the athletic directors, that will be a big push. And then, just making sure that students are staying in the lines there. It's not pay for play. It's not pay to participate in an athletic competition. That's still prohibited. And there's also going to be some rules around, making sure there are no improper inducements and that sort of thing. And the campuses we're very prepared for this. They've been tracking it. Currently has a policy. MSU will follow shortly. Everything will be hopefully in place very quickly by the time student sports gets underway again this fall. So that's kind of the lay of the land on that issue, but happy to answer any questions this board may have.
Questions?
Chair Lozar, thanks so much, Ms. Thickman. Do we have a responsibility to track what these students are doing, or is there a mechanism in which they have to report these pieces?
Yes, Mr. Chair, Regent Buchanan, the part of the policies that will be put in place on the campuses will require students to report that activity. The campus is not going to say what they can and can't participate in as long as it doesn't conflict with current contracts that the university may have in certain areas, or it might go against certain values of the campus, maybe tobacco, that kind of thing. But they are going to be having students report the information.
Any other questions? So I do have a question. You mentioned that University of Montana is developing or has developed a policy, MSU is as well. This is something that's been on a conversation nationally for quite a while. And I'm just curious, as you guys have been following it closely, and maybe Clay, you've been interacting with other system heads, what are systems doing in regards to sort of policy where there's multiple campuses? And it's great that University of Montana is jumping on it so quickly, and MSU will as well. But I'm just thinking of in terms of the board policy, a system, like how are systems sort of responding to this news?
Yeah, Mr. Chair, great question. And as you would guess, I guess it's the United States, right? Everybody's doing something different. And that's kind of what we've gathered from our conversations with system heads. Some were, just incredibly prepared for the decision that came out a few weeks ago and implemented policies at a system level the day after. Others took a little more cautious approach because after all, the decision's somewhat narrow on whether it's an antitrust violation. It doesn't really get into many of the other things that Helen discussed. And so I think we're on the right track. But I think a lot of systems are considering if there shouldn't be some guidance, so we don't have every campus within our own world with MUS doing something a little different. And to be honest, that doesn't start to create some weird environment of competitive advantage or not, that we're having our own campuses sort of compete at that level as well. So, my recommendation to this board would be, we don't need to rush to anything, but that we work with Helen and others at this team here to campuses to sort of build some framework that we have in front of you guys before too long to consider. And then where it's consistent or not with what the campuses are developing, they can adjust slightly if necessary. But I think that's an appropriate approach. And I think that's what most of your counterparts across the country are moving toward, all in sort of different phases of getting to that spot. But I think there will be, in the end, much guidance from the NCAA, some from the Big Sky Conference. And although they're a little reticent to do much at this point, but we'll see. And then ultimately, I think that systems and campuses and those that don't have system guidance will probably have to adopt policy. Okay. Anything else on that one? Okay. Helen, if you want, we can jump right into the commission staff.
All right. So, Mr. Chair, Mr. Commissioner, turning over to a different topic, the ARPA commissions. It is somewhat hard to believe, but it's really only been a few months since Congress passed the American Rescue Plan Act, ARPA, in March. Since that time, there's been a lot of activity, obviously, around that particular issue. The legislature passed House Bill 632. We talked a little bit about that at the May meeting. That's the bill, our state legislation that will implement ARPA in Montana and will appropriate the roughly $2.1 billion in ARPA funds throughout the state of Montana for the 2023 biennium. 632 created essentially 4 separate advisory commissions to sort of track the funds and gather proposals. That's the Infrastructure Advisory Committee. There's a Communications Advisory or Commission, excuse me, Economic Transformation and Workforce Development Advisory Commission, and a Health Advisory Commission. Each commission is comprised of 3 senators, 3 representatives, and 3 members appointed by the governor, staffed by various agencies like DNRC, Commerce, DPS, and then the staff in the governor's office through the ARPA program. As I mentioned, the commissions will make recommendations to the governor for the funds. So the commissions themselves aren't making final decisions on the funds, but putting together packages for consideration by the governor. And they are extremely important because they are vetting the proposals and putting those packages together. In terms of engagement from this office, we are primarily focused on 2 of the 4 commissions, which is the Infrastructure Commission and the Economic Workforce Development Commission. And that's just because of how the funding broke down and kind of where the topics ended up being located. On the infrastructure front, Ron Muffick has been very involved with that and has been working with state A&E and DNRC, I'm sure, to prepare submissions for the water and sewer projects, which is sort of the first round of funding. Those applications are coming in from the campuses and will be submitted today to that commission. And that, again, is really the first round. Capital projects will probably be a little bit later, and we're still going to be working through that. The other commission we've engaged with is the Economic and Workforce Commission, and that process has been a little less clear. They've had a couple of meetings, but I think they're really just starting to get going at this point. There is a meeting next week on the 21st, and so I think we'll have a lot more details after that meeting. And I did want to let the board know that we have submitted at least 3 proposals so far to that commission to kind of see if we can get some movement on that front. And certainly I can go into a little bit more detail. Dr. Brock Tessman has probably more detail on the specific packages that were submitted, but one is sort of an updated MReady 2.0 package at around 15 million. That would be centered around some small business economic vouchers, an innovation grant program, and sort of establishing what we're calling tech transfer hubs. We've also submitted a proposal for workforce development, for updates to CTE and trade programs to improve technology and equipment at 2-year and community colleges, and then a separate proposal for workforce training in the healthcare field to meet public health needs. So as I said, that next meeting is on the 21st, and I think we'll have a good idea, but I think the important piece for this is that we are engaged, we are working through that process. I've had conversations, we have a meeting next week with some of those folks, so we're really trying to engage as much as we can right now, trying to work through that. So, but it's there's a lot of moving pieces, and we'll keep this board informed as we go.
Great. Any questions from the board?
Yeah, sure. Those, I guess the only question would be, as these are submitted to these commissions, do we have an anticipated date of decision by the governor's office?
Mr. Chair, Regent Buchanan, that's a great question. It's my understanding that at this next meeting, they're really going to be putting the information together, gathering it, and then they'll come back, I think, later in August, perhaps at least the Economic Workforce Commission, and maybe have some packages firmed up at that point. But I think we're looking like into August, into the early fall, to have a better understanding of really what's going to be recommended for the governor. That's what I know. The commissioner might have.
That's what I know. Yeah. And Mr. Chair, Regent Buchanan, there also there's not a consistent schedule. I mean, the different committees and commissions are sort of doing their own thing. So some may move quicker depending on sort of what's on their agenda. But I think it's still a little bit up in the air.
Regent
Sort of
Dombrowski.
follow on. Is the 2.1 billion, how's it distributed across those commissions?
That's a really good question. And excuse me, Mr. Chair. We can get you that breakdown. It's 582 million for infrastructure, 275 million for the Communications Commission, which is very focused on broadband technology, 443 million for the Economic Transformation and Stabilization Commission, and 383 million for the Health Advisory Commission. And could be off.
No, that's very helpful. No, that-
It's broken down by the how it came through the federal
From the-
funding, and there are significant treasury regulations around how those funds can be used. And there's other funds in there for like rental assistance and all these different pieces. But so there really is a lot for that particular program to track. And I don't envy those that are having to do all of that piece, because it is an enormous lift, especially trying to figure out, what fits within the regulations and all.
Yeah, Mr. Chair, Regent Dombrowski, the other thing to know about that too is that of the $2.1 billion, much of it is sort of earmarked already, and some of that even during the legislative session. Like, for example, in the infrastructure, 500 and some million, there's about 78 million or 74 million, some number just over $70 million that is still left to be decided. Much got decided during the session. Some things, as Ellen explained, are mandated within the federal legislation itself, backfill for unemployment. I mean, there's some things that have to go in certain directions. There was, by the end of the session, much of one pool, $907 million, I believe, in the 601 funds or whatever, that there was still a fair amount of discretion on, but the commissions aren't deciding 2.1 billion. It's a fraction of that. And there is some language, they may not have to decide all that. Some may actually be still around when the 2023 session comes back, and they may decide some at that point too.
Okay, helpful. Thank you.
But in terms of, Helen, you mentioned the three different items in the package for proposals to the Economic and Workforce Commission. I mean, they align very closely with things that we've discussed as a board and prioritized for legislative session. But I'm just curious, beyond those items, like, is there a process that OT is going through to really identify with the campuses other proposals that we may bring forward in front of the other commissions?
Yeah. Mr. Chair, the answer is yes. Obviously, we had the ones that we identified during the session and that's board participated in, and those continue to move forward, particularly the case in LRBP. We're just sort of working our way down the list of priorities that you all had established. There is a process working with the campuses, but be honest, the other side of this is that we also have things that will affect us coming from other sources, Department of Labor or Department of Commerce, Montana Chamber of Commerce. There's things that they're moving to the commissions that will include work from us and a collaborative effort. And so most of it is mainstream, what you've already seen in conversations prior, working with the campuses. And then there's some that is very similar in nature, but is coming from outside sources that we are participating with.
Yeah, Dr. Muffet.
Mr. Chair, members of the board, I would just add, we have a meeting every Friday at 11 o'clock with the Architecture and Engineering Division and the Department of Natural Resources, and all the campuses in our office to go through the process of identifying projects for the water and sewer and for the capital development. So we're on it. There's a significant, as the commissioner touched on, there's a lot of people at the table, particularly with the water and sewer. We've submitted or will submit today for water and sewer projects, 6 projects for about $10 million. And that's the first tranche, if you will, the first group that'll be submitted. So 2 of those are at U of M, 1 at MSU Billings, 2 at Western, and 1 at Miles City.
Yeah, Mr. Chair, remember, in our LRBP process, there's several hundred projects identified on that list. We talked about this in terms of the overall deferred maintenance a few years ago. That list stays in place and we have it prioritized, obviously, for the sake of reality and funding. We tend to focus on the top 10 or 15 items that will move to legislative agendas into the governor's office and beyond, but that list is in place. And so some of these projects that are higher on the list don't meet the criteria under the federal legislation for sewer, water, and the rest. So we've worked our way down. And so, there's items that could be a ways down on the list, but fit the criteria of the federal guidance that are now part of the conversation. So it is reshuffling, but it's the list that we've long been working on with campuses and is years in the making in terms of a kind of grassroots participation in those efforts.
Any other questions from the members of the board? Clay, any other comments or introductions?
Yeah, Mr. Chair, just one other topic I want to touch on briefly. Dawson Community College, you may or may not know, is going through a transition of leadership there. They're have made some changes and are seeking a new president. There's been a few stories about this. I will tell you from this office perspective, we're in close contact with the chair of the local trustees there, Chad Knutson. He's been very open, very transparent, and had great communications. We continue to offer whatever support that OCHI can provide, and frankly, what other campuses, if we need to bring in assistance, we will certainly do that. President Slinger down the road at Miles has been very helpful in trying to work through this process, and we'll continue to do that. We are not trying to manage. That is certainly a job for the local trustees, and we respect their role and will allow them to do that. But we are offering whatever assistance we can to help stabilize that situation as best we can, and we'll continue to do so. Nothing that we need to do there. I just want you all in the loop on that front. Other than that, the campus reports are posted. Once again, a lot of information there from each campus. Encourage you to read through them. I think we've hit on the introductions. And Mr. Chair, I believe that concludes my portion of the agenda.
Thank you. Thank you, Commissioner. We will transition if Dylan Clapmeyer is available, transition to his report, our remarks on behalf of Governor Gianforte. I see you there, Dylan. Floor is yours.
Thank you, Chair Lozar. Appreciate it. One second here to move my screen.
I think you're on mute.
Can you hear me?
We still can't hear you.
That's odd. Can you hear me?
Is that on our end?
Can you hear me now?
Bear with us, Dylan. One sec. We're working on this on our end. Try it again, Dylan.
Can you hear me now?
We can.
Okay, great. Thank you, Chair Lozar and Regents. Apologies, I'm not there in person and through Zoom. The Board of Public Education is going on at the same time right now, so I've got to jump down there after this meeting. My report today will be fairly brief. I just want to start off by congratulating Regent Sexton on being reappointed to the board. We really look forward to her service over the coming year, and she had a great conversation with the governor last month. Just a few updates since the last time we met. I've been working with your staff at OCHI, as well as the Board of Public Ed and OPI, on getting the statutorily required biannual Board of Education meeting scheduled. That's the joint meeting between the Board of Regents and the Board of Public Ed that's chaired by the governor. We're looking at possibly doing that during the Board of Public Education meeting in September, and then the second one during the Regents meeting in November. So I'll continue working with your staff on that, and I'm sure they'll keep you updated. The governor met with the commissioner recently and had a good meeting with the governor as well. He kind of laid out his 4 things that he would like to see the university system pursue, and I'm happy to answer any questions and continue working with your staff on that. But the governor really wants to look at the underlying costs of higher education under the university system in Montana. He wants to take a deep dive into graduation rates and trying to get more on-time graduation rates, innovation in general with the campuses, and your staff have shared some great examples of innovation that are going on the campuses. And then the governor, due to his business background, is particularly interested in public-private partnerships. And again, your staff has shared some of the great work that's already being done in that area. I do have scheduled standing meetings with various staff at OCHI, and I really appreciate their willingness to engage with the governor's office and bring us in and have conversations about the direction of post-secondary education in Montana. As the commissioner said in his report, it's been a busy week with education meetings. Yesterday, we were all at the Education Interim Committee. It was the first meeting of the Interim Education Committee for this interim. There's some topics that they're going to dig into that are of interest to the governor's office that I'll talk about in a second. But just wanted to let you know that due to my dual portfolio of education and workforce development, I'm also going to be closely working with the Economic Affairs Interim Committee, along with Departments of Labor and Commerce. So I know that a lot that goes on in economic affairs is important to the workforce development initiatives of OCHI. So I'll look forward to working with your staff on that as well. Some of the topics that the interim committee is going to be diving into this next year and a half that are of interest to the governor's office and might be of interest to you as well are House Bill 403, and that's the grow your own legislation, with really trying to get young Montanans into the education profession and into our college prep programs. House Bill 279, we're really excited to see what comes along with these PPP tax credits. That'll be interesting to see if both the private sector and public education are using that as an opportunity to engage with each other and offer especially work-based learning opportunities for students. The Education Interim Committee is probably going to be diving into career and technical education in general, which is of interest to the governor's office. School choice and instructional innovation are on their agenda, as well as HJ 47, and that's looking at education opportunities for the incarcerated or recently incarcerated. And so I'm working closely with the governor's health policy advisor on that. And then finally, directly in the post-secondary realm, like the EIC might be looking at the underlying costs of higher education. And as I said, the governor kind of identified that as one of his priorities that he'd like to look at over his term here. So with that, I think that is all that I have since our last meeting, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Excellent. Thank you, Dylan. Do any board members have any questions or comments for Dylan? Seeing none, Dylan, thanks again for joining us and for the update, the report. Certainly, from a board perspective, it's great to see the commissioner and his staff working so closely with you and the team over at the governor's office. And I know the commissioner and Governor Gianforte are regular communications around priorities and sort of sharing the story of some of the things that are happening in the Montana University system. We look forward to that relationship continuing to grow, and we look forward to the opportunity for Governor Gianforte to join us as well. Maybe in the September meeting or our meeting in November. Certainly we'll see him at the Board of Public Ed in November, but certainly he's welcome to come and join and engage with all the fellow members of the Board of Regents. And just a little bit of gratitude selfishly from the board perspective. We very much appreciate the governor's reappointment of Regent Sexton. We're excited to have her back on board for another year. So please extend our gratitude to the governor on that item. So thank you, Dylan. We will go ahead and transition to our next guest. Superintendent Arnson, it's great to see you. It's good to see you in person. It's been a while.
Has been.
We appreciate you taking the time to come to Ochi and provide an update and a report. So
Always.
welcome.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Commissioner and Regents and staff as well. It is great to be in person. Isn't that what we do, especially in education? So I'm very pleased and graciously, as previous Regent Sheehy had said, I only have missed one meeting, so I'm all in with you. I believe in that B20 look. I believe in a great opportunity for our students. I would like to have a larger increase of students rather than 40% that go on to post-secondary. So we have a great opportunity right now, regardless of what happened 15 months ago. Let's make sure that opportunity is really innovative moving forward and making sure that we have all students recognized. So I have forwarded my remarks to you. I don't necessarily need to reiterate or repeat that, but I do have a couple really interesting things if I could. And this has to deal with our ACT delivery. And I want to thank you very much for that partnership. And I know we have another year secured that we're going to be moving forward in the testing of our secondary students in 11th grade, quite possibly with that Aspire test as well. So with ACT, there were 4 different deliveries, a lot of flexibilities. And I believe that's really the mode of where we need to be. It is about the student that is taking the test, but it's the teacher in the school that where it's proctoring at this point. And because of the virus, it taught us a lot about test security. A lot of the tests occurred, how do I want to say, it had to be in person. It was in paper. That's a whole different mode than what the flexibilities that I would like to put forward to whoever does that test in our partnership, whether it is a test for an entry into post-secondary, a test of completion, or an assessment of what occurred in our K-12 system. So want to really look to see how that test is delivered. And more importantly, who takes that test? So just some simple numbers. We were basically down in all of that, even though we offered those that didn't complete in 20 in the spring, we offered opportunities into the fall of this school year and then also into the spring. But we shortened windows. We made sure that we had great professional development going out to our test coordinators. And more importantly, we looked to see who hadn't completed the year before when it was non-COVID. So trying to capture an element of students that may not have ever thought about this, but putting the emphasis on more of a completion thing. So we were down about 1,500 students this last spring that didn't complete or had that opportunity. And this was juniors and seniors as well. So there's a great movement of gathering and more students as we open up these school doors into the spring of 22. We were at 94.5 completion in 2020, or 2019, I take. In 2020, we were down to 63. So from 94 to 63, and that was basically when the test windows opened, then of course our school doors were shuttered because of the pandemic. And then this year in 2021, we were at 83.7. So a lot of things, we're growing up, let's put it that way, within that assessment. And I don't want to just bank that it's just on a test score. There's a lot of things that also happen with student engagement and trying to capture those students, not just over a test, but over what is being learned. So we have a lot of things that we can work on within the ACT, and I'm grateful for our partnership. The other thing that I'd like to move toward is teacher retention and recruitment. And I think, we have super partnership movement, making sure that we have children that have that best quality teacher in front of them, personally, or even in that virtual model. Bozeman opened up and asked for an accreditation model in a virtual school. Never really had anything like that before. Accreditation was paused because of the pandemic. We're going forward to the Board of Public Ed and asking for another year of maintaining that accreditation status. Not to harm schools, but to have schools get their legs underneath them, to have them not be dinged or having any kind of action to them, but working with them. And that accreditation model, I believe, is important. Accreditation is on input as well as on output. That output model is that assessment that I spoke to with ACT. But if I could give just a few renditions of what's happening in teacher retention and recruitment, and it's very challenging. And I can't directly say that the pandemic was because of it, because I know we've been in a very downward spiral. And all the states that are rural are in that very same part. But if we're talking about workforce development with the governor's office, as well as in your office, Commissioner, making sure that we have an opportunity for students, wherever they may be, to be able to see that maybe teaching is an avenue, maybe not now, but maybe later. But if I can get them into the door and get them interested in what that means, even to the component part, not licensing student teachers, but getting student teachers in as an intern, like we follow in the medical model, to have them come in after 2 years of pedagogy to be able to be paid as they process through. So thinking really out of the box is what I'm looking at. But if I could share some data, and like I said, it's not great data, and I would be more than happy to forward this. This is something that's just recently come into my hands, and it is of this last school year. So can I say that it's the pandemic? I could, but I'm reticent in doing that. So emergency authorizations, that happens when school districts have pretty much gone ahead and done everything they can to hire a licensed teacher. They look at who they have right now. They look who they have in their community. This is someone who has no education in pedagogy, no degree, possibly in education or in any degree of any kind. In 2020, we had 84 of them. In 2021, I have 120. Now, 120 teachers of people. These are people. These are great people that are from the community that have risen to the challenge to teach in any shape or form, K-12, in any of our schools. Could be rural, could be urban, mostly rural, I'll say that. The other part that I have is the highest subject area was that we believe was impacted were indeed our K-8. These are elementary. These are the majority of our teachers. And we had 40% of those that weren't there. In other words, had a hard time of hiring. So 40% of trouble hiring in just a K-8, which is not, I taught 28 years, fifth graders. It's not easy, but it means then that you don't have a special endorsement. So it's not the higher level of teaching. We have that pretty much secured in our math and sciences in secondary into high school. And that's the most nexus with you. The challenge with emergency authorization were in our comprehensive schools. And this is by a federal determination. These are our tribal schools. This is the bottom 5% of our schools. And we had 22% of all those emergency authorizations were in those schools. So they can't find teachers. They can't find those licensed teachers that have either gone through your system, a 2-year, or have any kind of education degree behind them at all. So if I'm looking at elevating our students up with whoever they are, if I haven't a teacher that is there, then that is really challenging for those students in those communities that are trying to lift up everyone within there. So the other thing that I have accreditation deviations. Even though we asked the Board of Public Ed to maintain accreditation from the 19 status through the 20 status and asking again today with them, we still gathered some data because a lot of the data was required for our federal partner. And if I could just share on that, the trends that I have in our 5-year accreditation that are taken from this, we had in our teacher license. So we asked, do you have teacher's license? Are they misassigned? Overall, in the 1920s, so pre-pandemic, we had 69 schools that recorded some deviation regarding licensure. In this last pandemic year, there were 136, doubled. It doubled. And that means then that they were having trouble. Even though we asked them to maintain and we said we weren't going to harm you or anything at all, we wanted to help you and everything else, they still couldn't find that workforce or they couldn't find that role. And then let's go to the critical shortage that I have to record versus the state statutes, but it's also part of the ARP money that you mentioned, Helen. And so understanding where we are in our critical shortage areas, I'm down 20%. So those are the areas that I can't find anything that would be resemblance of a licensed teacher in any of our areas. So in 2019, it was 1,251. And in 2020, it was 10,039. Down 20% in our critical shortage areas. Those are the ones that we have to focus on as partners. That's the one the legislature is looking at. The federal government is also looking at that. So if I could give just some more and these are key takeaways. In this critical shortage area, the total FTE that I need to hire, it was 15,000 that I needed. I had the possible hire of those that had licenses that I've looked at and everything else, because we're really granular looking at it. It was about 500 that I could possibly hire within that. That meant that I had the difficulty or the not being able to fill at 67%. 67%. And these are educators as a whole. School systems that are reservation schools, we're all educators. I had a total of FTE that I needed to hire of 175. Possible hire was 19. That meant that I couldn't fill at an 89%. And this is not good stuff, but it's so important for us to really look at this data here and make our decisions based on what we can and the opportunity that we have. I used an emergency license at 146 to be able to fill that. And that's what I said. So the other part that I have are special education. They're 11% of our population. They're in every school. They're in my classroom. They're in every classroom across our state. So I needed to have special education. And these are teachers. These are not paras. At 191, that is what I needed. I had a possibility of hiring at 22. So I had 88% that weren't filled last year. We know it's trending, going to be worse, but our state is opening up, partnering with the governor's office and how creative to have education and economic development and everything that is working right now to move that forward. And Dylan came from our office. He was with me for 4 years. We have a real strong partnership, and I want to continue our partnership, Commissioner and Regents. Very, very challenging. Some of the solutions, though, because we knew this was coming. So some of the good news that we have. We've had 2 virtual fairs, and one was in April and one was just last month at the end of the month. The first one in April, we had 180 applicants, and we had 24 districts, majority of those rural and tribal. So we are seeking different channels. We're on Facebook, social media, we're marketing as much as we possibly can and trying to connect. Because I know right now I have 300 applications, calls into the office that I haven't been able to process. We all are trying to find great workers. We're all trying to find that methodology. The legislature gave us 13.5 million of the ARP money to be able to look at our data systems. This is our number one. By the time I talk to you next year, I should have a teacher retention recruitment tool that is going to be able to talk to our teachers, our prospective hires, to be able to line them up with a district, wherever that district might be, plus also to be able to feed them professional development. We license every 5 years. So in that first year, let's wrap them up in a mentorship. Let's survey them. Are you in the right spot? What else do you need? Second year, the same thing. Third year, let's embrace them with more professional development. And in that fourth year, let's really make sure that they want to be a Montana teacher, that they want to be a Montana leader. Let's move them into that role of superintendents. I could give you data on our teacher leaders that run our budgets in our school districts, that run those meetings at that district level with our board members. There's so much change. The other thing that we have done, we have asked, and we did this last September, the Board of Public Ed to open up Chapter 57. It's their rules governing licensing. Right now, and I'll be very blunt, we discriminate against out-of-state teachers. 47% of those 300 applications are out of state, and we don't talk to one another kindly. Now, I don't necessarily need 100% reciprocity, but I need to have something that says, yes, if you have worked in school and you're bona fide and you are an ethical teacher, that migration from where you are to where you are in Montana, a great opportunity. I'm leaving teachers on the table. I need to embrace them and bring them in. Then, as I shared about the licensing system and how we're really actively marketing, we need to do better. This is a call to action. This data is to improve, but we've known it all along, but it's going to be part of our conversations moving forward within that. So there's other great news that is happening in our world. I'm sure there is a great partnership that we have on our doorstep that we could open up even more so. The interim has begun. And I know I've got the Board of Public Ed, that we've got lots of our information that we're flowing, but we must do this together. It's our kids, whoever, wherever, and however old they are. I know you're gleaning. I need to do the same thing. So in the retrospect of economic development, when our teachers leave the market, and we had a great flow that moved out, are you talking to the teachers that are leaving K-12 to help you in your workforce? Because I'm talking to economic development across our state to say, look, they know how to work. They may know now how to work. They're drug-free. Majority of them are, for sure. They're ethically minded. Put them to work in your businesses, in your small business and your big businesses. I'm also saying, glean those teachers, those administrators that have now left my workforce. They're Montanans. Encourage them to work at the university system, whatever component that might be. What a great bridge from me to you as well. And then I'm going to ask the same thing. Do you have anybody that would like to fit in my world that might be a great fit, that great transition partnership? Because we're seeking, as I just shared, good people. So with thank you. I'm blessed to be in my role. I'm blessed to be here. I'm not going to miss these meetings. They're very important to me. And I don't just want to talk. It's all about that action. So thank you for what you're going to do as much as what our partnership is going to be. I appreciate the opportunity.
Thank you, Superintendent. Yeah, Regent Nystuen.
Chair Lozar, thank you. Superintendent Arnson. Last meeting, May 26th, we had a comprehensive report produced by the Commissioner's Office on dual enrollment. And the trend lines are certainly favorable and so forth. But I think on prior occasion, I'd love to hear dual enrollment from your perspective.
Sure.
What's working? What are the gaps we need to bridge? I think even at that meeting, Regent Bao brought up some questions relating to some licensure issues and some things like that. Would this be a topic we could put on the Board of Education agenda, or you give us this information at our September meeting in Butte? I
Yes,
asked before, and I'd really like to hear dual enrollment from your perspective.
thank you. Thank you, Chair. And thank you, Regent. You're spot on. Something happened this last legislative session that might have neutered all of the work that we've been doing, which allows a little bit more flexibilities, and we're working through the rules. I don't necessarily know what the name of it. It was Representative Bartolio's bill. You know, Commissioner, what I'm visiting about? You know what I'm sharing? Yes. And it's not, and I don't mean the word neuter and, blow up or anything that's dramatic. I think it offers more flexibilities. So we're working in making sure that compatibility of what we've done can move forward with whatever flexibilities were offered in that. So we're a little bit in a transition. But I think, as Dylan had mentioned, that board meeting would be in September. What a great opportunity to be able to do that. And I think the partnership that offers to those students, like I said, if 40% go on to you, then that dual enrollment, or if they don't go on right now, maybe there's a way they can cash that to go on later, whenever that economic opportunity or that lifestyle opportunity opens up for them at that point. So I know there's been work that's been done in that realm. There's a little bit more things that are occurring that we need to look into more. So I very much appreciate that you're the champion for this.
Well, we're great partners, but I'd like to hear
Yes,
your perspective.
yes,
What do we need to do
yes.
to tear down more barriers?
Yes. So one of the things, if I could, thank you. One of the things, we had a transition entity, Commissioner, that we budgeted, half my budget, half your budget. And that person has gone away because of budgetary reasons. But I'd be more than willing to see what it is that we could do, because that would be the bailiwick of that entity, to make sure then that bridge, that partnership is as seamless as possible, not so much for our offices, but for that student that we serve. So that was the work, and I'm not saying anything, but if we could begin a discussion on how we could partner with an FTE in yours and mine, with a career technical development, as the emphasis is coming out of the governor's office, with the emphasis is coming out of legislation. Maybe that's what's needed more. So it's not two shops that are siloed, that we're showing Montana, showing our policymakers that we're moving on this thing together. So let's see if there's that availability. And it might be in that short-term window with the ARP money. Maybe it's something that the governor's dollars could possibly glean if we make that request, because when we invest in people, we invest. And there is that budgetary concern. But I think that might be spot on to really entrench and embed. That was my purpose within that, but I understand budgets. But I'd be happy to, coming back to the September meeting, working through a presentation and letting you know ahead of time what our plan is with both of you.
Yeah, Regent.
Chair Lopez, Regent, thank you for your comments. I agree. I'd like to hear more about dual enrollment at the next meeting. I just wanted to address a couple of comments to your priorities, which is very appreciative that the ACT remains a priority, although it's not required by our system. It's a good tool for a lot of our students. So we're happy to hear you remain focused on that. Teacher retention is a crucial issue around the state. So thank you. The other point is that the teacher accreditation, and you mentioned a specific article, I think that's an enormous obstacle and roadblock to bring teachers in. So my district has had a number of teachers and administrators who we brought in, and it's a prohibitive financial obstacle for probably most school districts. So I think that you could, if your biggest problem, as it sounds like, is finding more teachers to want to work in Montana and rural areas, that getting that hurdle diminished from out-of-state teachers would be a very easy way to unlock a few new jobs. Because right now what happens, as you are well aware, is that teachers need to go back to the Montana University system and take courses. And it's, we've found ways to work with that, but I think it would be very difficult on a statewide basis for smaller districts to work with those current guidelines.
Thank you that, if I could. We have a jewel, and it can shine even brighter. It's a virtual learning, how do I want to say, pathway. So to renew every 5 years for a teacher, there are 60 renewal units. Some could be brick and mortared, some can be virtual. What I'm finding with the licensing and opening up these chapters of licensing and accreditation, not only was it licensing with Chapter 57, 58, with teacher prep programs. So we're working with the Council of Deans, and then licensing is Chapter 55. I mean, accreditation is Chapter 55. I apologize. So those three things, that work is underway right now. They all dovetail together. They all work together. To remove hurdles and to offer more flexibilities has been my mission since I was elected into this position. Government is there, but government needs to be working for our consumers. And in my world, those are our teachers, but more importantly, our children. So we're working with our rural districts as well as with our urban districts. You know, I was told there are 70 new applications us. This is from Great Falls, for brand new teachers, 70 new hires in the second largest district of 11,000 students. That's huge. If they can't find them, what is that going to do? The other aspect, and I'll share this. I believe in Montana children. I am the Montana Public State Superintendent. That private education, we noticed in COVID, more students left in our student count. They left in K-8, and then they came back in secondary in the spring when we had our spring count. But I still am trending down in enrollment in the public system. So where are they going? I have 115 non-public entities, and then I have 5,000 homeschools that record annually at the county level with the county superintendent. If you're going to glean, if I'm going to glean those students, we need to talk to those families in all of our communities. We're public, but we need to make sure that we support all of our children with great opportunities. That's another thing I think that we are missing. One of the things that's happening in licensing, it's very challenging to license someone from a non-public, a Catholic system, to a public system, or from a public system to a Catholic system. If we're all in this together, let's look at education together, and more importantly, what that does for our children. But I know my role. I know what we have to do, but we can't leave them out because they are part of that math equation. Thank you very much for this. I very much appreciate it. And I probably overstayed, and you have quite a long.
No, I was just going to say, I appreciate the pause for a longer conversation. I think in the past, the board has heard, we've had panels, certainly you've brought this up several times, the issue around teacher recruitment and retention. Certainly appreciate you bringing the data today. Certainly some very startling data. And I think you're spot on that the university system plays a pretty critical role in preparing teachers. And so we're in this together for sure. So, please see Commissioner's office. I know they're doing a lot of work in this space, and the campuses are doing a lot of work. So whatever we need to do to alleviate this really large issue that we have for the state of Montana. The teachers are front and center preparing our young people to come into the workforce, come into the Montana university system. So whatever we can do to assist, we stand ready.
Thank you very much. And I did have a meeting, Chair Lozar, with Dean Harmon out of MSU. And we are working diligently with our 10 teacher prep programs, but it's not just them. It's making sure that I have individuals that are in engineering to understand what they might be able to help. And it's not a career day coming in once a year to a classroom. It's nothing as that. It's being an integral part of encouraging all to be part of that education system. And if we're going to have our economy rebound and even move forward, it's more important. On just a side note, I'm part of the land board, and I am very concerned about the dollars that flow of who we are in Montana. I have 4 components: oil and gas, surface mining and subsurface mining. I have retail. We've been from Whitefish to Kalispell in the 93. All that's full trust land, and that adds some money into our guarantee account. And then things come off of our ag, our grazing. We are down. It just finished on the biennium report. We are down, and we've been trending down. I have to then go to taxpayers in the general fund to ask for more money to get my 2.3 billion that is a request from the legislature. We're 40% of every tax dollar. So not that it's a world of hurt, but I need people to get to work. And education is not, K-12 is not a babysitter. But the more stability I put in as we open our school doors, the more that I can have Montanans be secure in that workforce. And I need to make sure then that we're balancing all of the wonderful things that Montana can do. Because we are a producer state, it depends on global markets. So this is not just a call out to Montana. This is a call out to our nation, to all of our global markets, to make sure that Montana has a seat at that table. And that's research and development from your end as well. You know, to make sure that we, not just our egg stations, but that we are first and foremost in Montana, shining that light. So this is working with the federal government and making sure that Montana is held whole. That's a big statement, what I just made. And I could be a classroom teacher, but we need to look at this as from an economic viewpoint, because education and economics are so very much tied. So I thank you again for allowing me the conversation. I'm all in. I'll do whatever it needs to be. And I thank you for your partnership.
Thank you, Superintendent.
Beg to leave. I need to get to another meeting. And, you know, it was so funny when all of these things hit, the legislature, the board, your board, the Board of Public Ed, and another adjoining meeting. It was like, you bet, it's game day. And not only game day, but it's game week. But I'm here, I'm readily accessible, and I'd be more than happy to answer any questions. The information I gave you on data points, I'll ship them immediately when I get back to the office. So you can see that. If you have any questions at all, please reach in and we'll be more than happy to.
Thank you, Superintendent.
Thank you.
Stay well.
Okay, let's move on to the next item on the agenda. And we've got a consent agenda. We've got a couple action items, and what we'll do is we'll consider action one at a time. So you see in front of you, you've all had a chance to review the the 4 items on the consent agenda. There's an IP item as well as a couple 3 emeriti faculty items. I'm just curious if there are any items that any regent would like to move from the consent. Seeing no, I will entertain a motion to approve the consent agenda.
So moved.
By Regent Sexton. Is there any comments from the board? Is there any discussions, comments, corrections from the campuses? If so, please raise your hand, use the raise your hand feature or dial *9 if joining by phone. Seeing none, is there any public comment? Any public comment?
Yes.
Yes, okay.
Yeah, Tammy Harris. You may unmute and make your public comment.
Tammy? Tammy, can you hear us?
Sorry, that was an accident. I didn't mean to raise my hand.
Okay. Thank you, Tammy. Any other public comment? Seeing no further comment, I'll call for the vote. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, same sign. Okay, motion passes. Moving on to the action items. The first item for discussion today is a request for authorization to increase Board of Regents authority for the remodel of Aber Hall at University of Montana. And I believe Director Muffick will address this item. Director Muffick.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the board. So this item authorizes an increase in authority for the Aber Hall remodel, transitioning from student housing to administrative space. This item sets a record for a facilities item appearing 3 times in front of the board in 9 months, kind of indicative of the construction climate we're dealing with right now. The project was originally approved at the November 2020 meeting for $1.3 million and later increased to $1.6 million at the May 2021 meeting. Final request, I assure you this is going to be the final request on this item, is for $3.2 million in authority. Then kind of touched on it. This increase is due to the current construction climate that we're dealing with. We've got supply chain issues driving up material costs. We've got labor shortages driving up labor costs. But secondly, there's also been some further refinements within the project as the planners got into it more, the architects, and speaking with the different departments on the campuses that are moving into this building, they needed some other changes, larger rooms, conference rooms, making doors wider for the ADA. When you open up a building like this for a remodel, then the city comes in and they take a look at the building, and there's a number of code things that you also need to address. So ADA was addressed, and also a backup generator for the elevator was fired to meet code. So there were some other changes. The HVAC to accommodate the larger rooms, HVAC had to be moved around a lot more, so that increased the cost. Scope of the project remains the same, really. It's still a remodel of floors 1 through 6. It's not a scope creep, if you will. And the good news is earlier this week, we received bids on the project, and they're all within the increased authority amount. So we do not anticipate any additional increases. Stand for any questions as it relates to this item or other, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Ron. Any questions for Ron on this item? Okay. Thank you, Director Muffick. Just sticking with this, I'll entertain a motion to approve the request for authorization to increase Board of Regents authority for remodeling Aber Hall.
So moved.
Moved by Regent Dombrowski. Is there any comments or questions from the members of the board? Seeing none, is there any discussion or corrections from the campuses? Again, if so, please use the raise your hand feature or dial *9 if joining by phone. Is there any public comment? Any public comment? All right, seeing no further comment, I'll call for the vote. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, same sign. Motion passes. Moving on to the last item, action item B, request for approval of Montperg fee, University of Montana, Missoula. I believe, Helen, you're going to be speaking to this item. So turn it over to Executive Director of Recruitment.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the board. The next item is the approval of an optional fee for Montperg at the University of Montana. For those of you that need a quick refresher, Montperg is both a recognized student group at U of M and an independent nonprofit organization with its own board of directors that is comprised of students in Montana. Montperg has been around for nearly 40 years and provides opportunities for student engagement, citizenship activities both on and off campus. It's my understanding the organization does not support or oppose individual candidates, but does engage in issue advocacy work on various ballot issues in Montana. For the last several years, Montperg has received financial support through an optional student fee that is voted on by students at the University of Montana. And that is an important piece to keep in mind. The fee is an opt-out fee, meaning that students have to specifically opt out of paying that fee. Montperg is typically included in the biennial budget recommendation for approval by the board after the legislative session. OCHI this time around recommended the fee not be included in that fee schedule from UM as a result of some legislation that passed last session. That bill, which we did discuss in our update in May, is Senate Bill 319, and it did a bunch of different things, but part of it purported to do was place certain restrictions on fees for student organizations that are also required to register as political committee political committees under state law through the Commissioner of Political Practices. And the limitations were, requiring fees to be approved through an opt-in process as opposed to opt-out, and prohibiting a campus from processing or distributing the fee with any systems or electronic processes on campus. Since that time, that bill has been challenged in 2 separate lawsuits, and there's really a lot going on with it there. The university system, as you know, is not a party to that suit, but we also learned that there is a written agreement between the University of Montana and Montperg that kind of outlines some of the details and agreement between those 2 entities, and that's in effect through 2022. So as a result, we're here today recommending that this board approve an opt-out fee as it has done in the past at $5 per semester and $2.50 per summer semester, just through the end of 2022. So on a 1-year basis. So it would take effect through, assuming this is approved through today, through the end of through June 30, 2022. That approval we are recommending be contingent upon the section of the law that impacts Montperg be contingent on the court upholding that section of the law and Montperg not registering as a political committee under state law. The board would, with that approval, come back next year and take another look at this. So that's what we would anticipate, and that would be the current plan, Mr. Chair. But I'm happy to stand for any questions. It's kind of a bigger topic, but happy to answer questions as I can.
So thank you, Helen. Any questions from members of the board? Okay. Well, at this point, then I'll entertain a motion to approve action item B, Montperg fee at the University of Montana. Moved by Regent Sexton. Is there any comments from members of the board? Is there any discussion or corrections from the campuses? If so, please use the raise your hand feature or dial *9 if joining by phone. Is there any public comment?
Yes. Jack Rink, you can unmute and give your public comment.
Hello, can y'all hear me?
Yes, we can.
Great. Well, Mr. Chair, members of the board, my name is Jack Rink, and I come before you in full support in the approval of the Montana Public Interest Research Group's fee affirmation today. So I'm currently a graduate student at the University of Montana, and I also happen to be a former Montperg board member. And while in that role, I was privileged to observe the work that the nonpartisan organization conducts from both an on the ground and an administrative level. And additionally, I was able to work closely with the Montperg lobbyists during the most recent legislative session. As a student lobbyist myself, advocating for the interest of students along with the general welfare of the MUS, I found close allies in the Montperg lobbyists who I witnessed to be tireless activists for individuals' rights to accessible voting and conservation efforts in our state. Civic engagement with Montana's youth will be the future of this state, and Montperg plays a pivotal role in that engagement. Without the affirmation of this fee, the youth of the state's ability to engage in state and local politics will be less robust. And with all sincerity, I thank you for your time today and request a due pass on this item.
Thank you, Jack. Is there any additional public comment?
Yes. Tor Goodmanson, you can unmute and give your public comment.
Mr. Chair, members of the committee, thank you for having me today. My name is Tor Goodmanson. I'm the current vice chair of Montperg Student Board, and I wanted to take a moment to talk about how much Montperg has helped, not just with my own growth and engagement, but with that of the students around me. It provides not just a voice and opportunity for students to advocate to their government and to become more engaged in their community, but it provides them with the tools and learning and understanding to step into a world that's not immediately familiar or particularly easy to enter into. So because of our work in support of the 6 mil levy and our ability to create engaged students who understand the world they're entering into, I urge you to vote yes on our fee structure, and thank you for your time today.
Thank you, Tor. Any additional public comment?
Yes, Alexa Runyon, you may now unmute and give your public comment.
My name is Alexa Runyon, and I'm a student at the University of Montana, as well as the chair of Montperg Student-Led Board of Directors. And because of Montperg, I have gained skills and knowledge about grassroots organizing and advocacy work. Montperg's hands-on approach to training leaders has aided me not only as an advocate, but in my coursework and professional life. In the organization's 40 years at the University of Montana, Montperg has trained many students to make their voices heard and to stand up for the issues that matter to them. Our efforts to create tangible change are aided by our student fee, which an overwhelming majority of students support. So Montperg can continue to train the next generation of leaders. I strongly urge you all to support upholding our fee. Thank you all very much.
Thank you, Alexa. Is there any additional public comment? Right. Seeing no further comment, I'll call for the vote. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion passes. All right. Thank you, everyone, for working through the business portion of our agenda. So we've now reached the point in the agenda to take public comment on any matter that's within our jurisdiction, but that is not on the agenda. So I will call for public comment. Again, if you'd like to provide public comment, please use the raise your hand feature or dial *9 if you're joining by phone. Jasmine, is there any public comment? We'll give it one more shot. Any public comment? Okay, seeing no public comment this morning. Our next item on the agenda will be taking up in an executive session. The meeting will be closed because the discussion relates to matters of individual privacy. As the presiding officer, I've determined that this discussion relates to a matter of individual privacy and that the demands of individual privacy clearly exceed the merits of public disclosure. So at this point, we will end the streaming for the meeting and go offline for the executive session. Thank you all who joined us today virtually.